you'll hear Ten Hag now on why Sancho was dropped from the squad. This was him.
Jadon was on his performance on the training. We didn't select him. You have to reach a level every day on Manchester United, and we can make choices in the front line. And so for this game, he wasn't selected.
So that's Ten Hag, Stuart, saying why there was no Jadon Sancho yesterday. Ten Hag then goes on social media and says, Jadon Sancho goes on social media and says, don't believe everything you read. I will not allow people saying things that are completely untrue. He says he's conducted himself very well in training this week. He respects all the decisions that are made by the coaching staff. He says, I'll continue to fight for this badge no matter what. That was Jadon Sancho. But something's wrong here, isn't it?
You would think so. The one thing surprised me that he didn't leave the club in the last transfer window. I thought he'd have been on his way. Quite often when a manager and player sort of fall out, I always err on probably the manager, because the manager probably sees things from everyone's perspective. The player sees things from their own perspective. And if he thinks that the player's not hit the standards he should have done, then there's only one person picks the team, the manager.
But you've been a manager though, Stuart.
Yes, I have.
Would you call him out in a presser like Ten Hag did?
Well, you're going to get asked the question. I'm sure he didn't offer it up. He got asked the question, where's Sancho? So you've got to answer it and be as honest as you can.
The general principle of managers criticising players in the media is frowned upon by the football fraternity. I don't think there's a problem with it. I think that it's character building at times. You've got to use it when you need to use it. But do you have an issue? Because one thing, him choosing to answer a question, if someone asks you in a press conference why the player isn't playing, you can just simply give an answer that's nondescript and move on. You don't have to be specific and explicit like he's been. He's chosen to be so. So if that's the case, are you happy with him suggesting to the rest of the world that the player's training isn't up to the standard that it should be?
Simon, the other side of that is potential bending the truth or lying as a manager. And I know sometimes you've got to be protective to yourself, to your football club, and to the player. No, I don't think so. Not for everyone. It isn't.
Come on, it is. Ultimately, you manipulate the truth to be able to manage the circumstances, because you have to spend your entire life prostituting yourself to manage the players.
Put it this way: he could have turned around and he said he's got a slight niggle. You're lying.
Yeah, well, he's volunteering information. Ultimately, you're lying if someone says, "Well, I've heard he hasn't got a niggle." Yeah. So what do you say to that?
Listen,
and then you're lying
all the time. You cannot. And you've got an ulterior motive on occasion as a manager. Sometimes you protect the players, sometimes you turn around and say he's not been up to standard in training, and those words hopefully arrive
but what
at
is the
Sancho.
Purpose of that? Because ultimately that's a very easy conversation to say to the player.
Which they've had.
In your relationship with the player, ultimately the player is going to respond to you and you alone, if that's if that's a mechanism you need to deploy as a manager, right? So you have this conversation and then you decide, which, by the way, I'm in favour of, you decide that you're going to put it into the media. You're going to bring the world's attention onto it. So now you've orchestrated a situation with players in this modern era where they're islands in their own right economically. So they won't put up with this. I think that's wrong as well. I think they've got to learn to take their own medicine at times. And you've now created a situation where the media now have got a manager turning around and saying that the player isn't training properly. The player rebuts that, accuses the manager of making him a scapegoat, and you have a situation that seems to have a zero-sum game in it for anybody.
Well, the bottom line is he's not getting much out of Sancho and hasn't done for the last year, so what's he got to lose?
It's a shame he didn't start trotting this out though, Simon. At Manchester City, Sancho's future there was in doubt. He failed to turn up for training on several occasions, following Guardiola's decision to leave him out the club's pre-season tour of the US. At Dortmund, he was dropped. He was fined 86 grand by Dortmund after arriving late back from international duty. Sancho was quoted in the Telegraph saying, in Germany, there are a few things I need to work on. Little things where I need to be a bit more professional. Slowly but surely, as I get older, I feel like I'm learning new things. He turned up late for Southgate in England.
Let's not dispute the versions of events that the manager's given. Let's analyse the reasons why he's given them to the media, and then why the player has bitten back rather than accept it. Because ultimately, it's not about whether Ten Hag is lying or whether Jadon Sancho is a model professional, because as you quite rightly have done, you've just been able to prove a body of work that suggests that ultimately there's form for this. And of course, you've got a player that's played 50, 60 games for Manchester United and hardly set the heather on fire. And there's people questioning his ability, and people are now looking at what Manchester United have bought at 75 million quid, and so they bought a pup. This is the same player that Ten Hag sent out to Holland last year to get his mind right, and had enough investment in him to actually send him to a place that Ten Hag has come from to be able to get this player into the right position. I don't understand why it's the case. The bigger question is what is the purpose of Jadon Sancho coming back and making the observations that he's made?
That's right.
When it's very, very easy.
Well, right of reply.
Well, right of reply, again, everyone's got the right of reply, but if you open your mouth and you say something ridiculous, what's the benefit of that?
Yeah, but if Ten Hag went public, shouldn't Jadon Sancho
But the
go
ultimate
public?
authority in the club, in the football operation, is the manager. And that, by Jadon Sancho coming back and saying something, I think it goes to the credibility of the manager's control over his players and the culture in Man United at this moment in time where there's no acceptance of their own responsibilities.
Is there any way back for Sancho?
Yes, there's always a way back for footballers. Always. But the manager might turn around and say, look, I've gone out on a limb with Ronaldo and put him out the team and out the football club, basically. And big call from the manager. As Simon said there, he's backed Sancho. He's tried to help Sancho last year. And sometimes as an individual and as a manager, because I've sat in that seat before, you think, I've gone out my way to help you. And all of a sudden, you've come back in and he's not happy with what he's seen in training, so he's left him out. You feel let down and disappointed, by the way. And sometimes you get a bit of frustration off yourself and think, I'm not going to back you up anymore.
And by the way, this example...
Right, so Ten Hag was right to say it.
I think so.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he's right to say it if he knows what the outcome's going to be. It's really easy to go around flinging around authority, and anyone can give someone a telling off. But if you don't know what the reaction's going to be, what's the point of it in the first place? You need to be doing it to get a reaction. If the reaction is you get a player biting back and saying what he said in the media, then I'm not entirely sure what you've achieved.
Yes.
And I'm not entirely sure that the example was put up by Alex Crook yesterday about Marcus Rashford responding to it was a particular poster boy moment, because it took Marcus Rashford months to get himself together. He spent months in a difficult state of mind, in a petulant state of mind. And it may have well been that Ralph Rangnick was not the perfect coach, but it took him a long time to get the penny to drop about where his performances were against where his attitude was. I think with Jadon Sancho, he's not a Manchester United player. He's not good enough to play for Manchester United, and that's the underlying problem. And what you're trying to do is squeeze a round peg into a square hole. The best thing they can do is recognise the fact that the player isn't good enough at this level and move him on.
I put it out there, actually, to Manchester United fans who are calling in numbers on Jadon Sancho. Was he due a right of reply, or was that foolish on his part to answer back to what Ten Hag said post-match at the Emirates yesterday? And is he good for Is he good enough for Manchester United? In your eyes, has this guy not been given long enough? 03717 223344 81089. And Michael is a big Manchester United fan. Michael, good morning to you. What do you want to say on Sancho?
How you doing, boys? I just think Sancho is he's not a Ten Hag signing. We've got to remember that, and he may not just be the makeup of the player that he wants. He was an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer signing, was it? And I feel like Anthony plays every game, and he may not even warrant a place in the team sometimes. But Ten Hag sees him in training every day. He knows that he does more than just assist and score goals. It's just a small part. But Sancho, for me, he's not really got the pace what Rashford and Anthony offer in those quick attacks he wants. But I feel like we've got to give Ten Hag the time to make that squad his own. It's still got 3 managers worth of players in it, I think, from before. I do think that with Sancho coming out, some people don't react well to criticism, and I feel like that's the younger generation. I'm like 40-something now, but I do get like the younger generation, they're not into the criticism like the older players used to be, or they can't just get on with it. It's just a different makeup, and it's fine to say, oh, well, just get on with it, you're paying lots of money, but it does affect people more than other people. But I just think he isn't a Ten Hag signing.
Michael, listen, thanks for the call. Is it a generational thing, Stuart? I mean, you were saying earlier on that you go out on the pitch and try and be man of the match every single time you played. I wonder if there's the same attitude here. I mean, what's his attitude when he goes in the field of play?
Of course it's a generational thing that has changed, but you've got to know the individual. If you're managing the individual, you've got to know what motivates those individuals. And we're all different with our levels of motivation, you know. And as Simon made a good point, you've got to have an outcome to everything that you do. I think probably with Ten Hag, this was based on a little bit of frustration. We've done what we can for you, and still you've let me down.
But it's a societal thing as well, Jim. People don't. It's a one-way transaction. I mean, half these footballers should actually be boxers, because the boxers have got the thinnest skin. You can't dare criticise any of them. You've got to get the fairness. If the criticism is fair, then criticism is as equally valuable as praise. If the only thing you can ever have in your life is praise, then you're going to go so far, because when it comes to adversity, you're not going to be prepared for it. So I think it's a societal thing. You can't say anything about anybody in this day and age without somebody being offended by it. And I think that part of the manager's repertoire is fair criticism to try and enhance the player's performance or to concentrate the player's mind. Now, whether you do that in the public domain because you've reached the end of the road and you think, I've tried every single lever, I've done everything I possibly can, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull you into the public domain and I'm going to name and shame you for your performances. Now, if that's the lever that he wants to pull, then okay. And if there's going to be and if that reaction, if he's happy with the reaction, he may well turn around in the next press conference and say, I like that. He may spin it around and say, I like the player's got some substance to push back on my observation. I don't think he will have liked the player's observations. I think he'd prefer the player to have come into his office and said, well, I didn't like what you said, boss, but ultimately I'll get my head down and get on with whatever it is you want me to get on with. But I think it's just a case of, we live in a society now where anybody that suggests that something you're doing isn't good enough is someone that's being unfair, they have an agenda, or they're just being bloody rude, when most of the time it's somebody saying, let's call it for what it is.
Yeah. Jermaine, do you agree with Simon on that? Another United fan.
Well, I've looked at it in a different perspective. I totally understand in terms of the Sancho responding, which was wrong in that case, but Ten Hag didn't need to come out and say anything at all. He's got Anthony. He's spent 82 million. What has he done? He's like a defensive winger. You might as well move on Bissaka and pay him up on the right wing. I just don't understand what Ten Hag is trying to do at this moment in time, because he spent all that money on the goalkeeper. Yeah, he can pass the ball 60 odd yards and he can move you from the back, but what is Manchester United's playing style?
Okay, Jermaine, listen, thanks for that. There's Sam in Hythe, big Manchester United fan, Stuart. Sancho, quite simply, listen to Simon. Sancho's not good enough. He's let every manager down with the level of his performances. He's static when he comes on. He's a couple of good games, thinks he's cracked it, then goes back the way.
For me, I'm seeing a kid there going back a few years when he was winning things with the England team and whatever, and I was hoping he would have a great future, that's going to be a consistent in the England squad at senior level, and I've just not seen it at the moment. And if managers are criticising him, somewhere down the line, he can't keep ticking along in his career and get to the end of his career and all of a sudden look back and say, you know what, I've not really maximised here.
Yes, which would be a tragic set of circumstances. Also a tragedy in the eyes of many United fans is that it looks like the Glazers maybe never had any true intention of selling Manchester United. I know we're a bit United-centric, but we make no apology for that. A lot more to get through between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us. Jim White, Simon Jordan, Stuart Pearce, live in a beautiful morning on talkSPORT.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.